so very much, everyone. This is the Find Your Space panel discussion, and the topic being women that bear the future. My name is Mamay Worku. I live in Denver, Colorado. I'm so excited to have this opportunity and be able to actually host this. This is a wonderful opportunity to talk about, finding our space in the world that we live in, and then in the world that we all share. So how do you find it? How do you embrace it? Then after we embrace it, how do we use a space that we're in right now, like I said, to influence or shape our own world, the world that we live in, and then the world that we all share? That's the main theme of this conversation discussion today. I have about 5 panelists, and Dr. Akre will also help us with facilitating the discussions at the end. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started with our speakers. This is the theme of our discussion today, finding our space. Take a minute, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Priscilla Rahn. I'm the vice chairman of the Colorado Republican Party. So when I talk about my why in politics, it's very closely connected to my values, especially my Christian values. And so that's a little bit of my perspective when I talk about my why in politics. But I wanted to first go back and talk a little bit about our history in America, because there was a suffrage movement where prior to suffrage and prior to the 19th Amendment, women were not allowed to be involved in voting, and we didn't really have much of a voice. And in 1919, during a Republican-dominated Congress, is when we were given this new amendment to be able to vote. And I put there Proverbs 31 woman, because when I read Proverbs 31, I hear a description of an amazingly strong woman who was also a wife, who took care of her home. She worked the land. She was a business owner. She made money, and she supported her husband. And it's just a beautiful mix of a strong, independent, yet dependent woman. And, we really should look at that woman as an example to all of us, because she wasn't subservient, but she was a helper. And I think that's one of the things that we bring as women when we're looking at politics, is that we bring a different voice. And there's also a description or a scripture in the Bible that talks about the older women teaching the younger women. And that's a valuable place in our world where we can learn from women who have a lot of experience. I have a lot of respect for older women because they bring a certain level of wisdom. Another reason why women should be involved in politics is because there are a wide range of policy issues to consider. And we as women have different priorities than men. Things that are important to us include our families, our children, education, healthcare. Those are a lot of the things that are at the forefront of our conversations when we're talking to other women, and we have the ability to bring that perspective into policies. I say this tongue in cheek, but a lot of women say, we get things done. We're worker bees, we're active. When we organize, we get a lot of women together, and all it takes is one email and we have a huge network of other women, other moms in order to get active. And so that's another dynamic that we as women bring. It's important to have women in decision-making because we bring diversity into conversations. Our perspectives as working women, single women, mothers, stepmoms, grandmas, we just bring different life experiences to the conversation. And when you have diversity in policy making, you tend to reduce some of the blind spots in policies, because prior to women being involved, a lot of decisions were made for us without our input, but now we have more of a voice. there is a corollary increase in policymaking that emphasizes quality of life and reflects the priorities of families, women, and ethnic and racial minorities. As we see here today, as women of African descent, we are bringing multiple different viewpoints into the conversation. Moms and women, we tend to be more family focused. We are very influential. Even prior to being highly involved in politics, we are influential with our husbands, with other men, other people in leadership, just by our nature of how we talk about issues. And another, spiritual connection that I have is that it's not good for man to be alone. And so we're partnership builders. And the more educated we as women are, the more we feel compelled to have our voices represented. What I would encourage women to do is to look at their community, look at civic engagement. It could start as simple as running to be on your PTA in your child's school, or running to be on the school board, or getting appointed to a commission, or running for city council. You can start small, being involved in your community. You don't have to have a big title to have influence in decision making. And I would encourage all women to find something that you're passionate about, something that you're knowledgeable of, something that where you see a problem and you have a solution to that problem, and work on coalition building. Talk with other women and find out what other women find important. And then you grow from there. It can start with a small house meeting, and then you multiply and multiply. But you don't have to be, a certain personality. You don't have to have a ton of knowledge. You just have to care about what's happening in your community in order to get involved. And that is what started my journey into political involvement, running for office, listening to what people are talking about, which is a really important quality to have when you are trying to make changes in your community, is listening to what is important to the people around you, and put your heads together and problem solve and come up with creative ideas and try to build consensus around making solutions, because everybody has different priorities and everybody has different solutions. So our job as women is to put all of those ideas on the table and say, what can we do? What can we tackle? Who has strengths in certain areas in order to address specific issues, and then work together, because we're greater when we're all together than when we're trying to work on our own. And, the trick is also to try and maintain relationships, because you don't want to be like a dictator when you're making decisions, but you want to build relationships and be kind to one another. And there's a little bit of give and take in politics. So making sure that we are preserving our liberties, our freedoms, especially our freedoms of thought, those are really important issues for us to protect. And for all of us that, especially as women of color, we know how important it is for us to make sure that we have equal opportunity and equal access to decisions that are made that impact us and our families directly. And so that is what I would encourage everybody who's watching to do, is find a place where you can get involved and share your voice and build relationships so that we can just all be stronger together.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate that. So even in politics, there is relationship making, there is relationship building, partnership. So thank you so very much for that information. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next person so that we will have some time to come back and discuss based on some of the things that you talked about. But thank you so much for that. The next person that would be presenting would be Dr. Dagdinesh. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, how are you guys? I'm so happy to be here. This is a place where I really enjoy to be. It's my passion. In my early 20s and early 30s, for 10 years, I have been heading women's organization in Ethiopia, trying to prevent these cultural harmful practices like circumcision and women's inability to decide how many children they want to have. So all those 10 years, I did it aggressively, being called crazy, as young, as energetic. And now I'm doing the same thing as a licensed professional clinical counselor in a very wise way, in a very calm way. 85% of my clients today are women who are dealing with anxiety, depression, psychotic episodes. So I'm still working with women. So I love it. Thank you, Mamay, for helping me to be here. Before I say anything, if nothing else, what I'm gonna do, I want you to keep it for yourself and cherish it. To have a space, to make a space for others and to see the world that women want to see, a healthy world. Number one, we have to take care of ourselves. This is a show and tell I want to show you. This is glass of water, full of water, and this is our lives, right? So children come and they take some of whatever you have in here. Husbands or boyfriends or partners or family come and take some of it right here from you. And churches, political affiliation, other responsibilities come and take some of it. And then our workplace come and take some of it. Of course, we don't live in vacuum. We live with friends, relationships, like it's already said by our first presenter, they come and take it. And then other responsibilities that we have, they come and take it. What do we have left here? Empty glass. The people who are used to take stuff from us and ask us to do things for them, they still come. So what happened? They come and knock. They come and knock. And we are not good in saying no. So what happens? This poor glass is gonna break. In that way, Mamay says something, or Priscilla says something, or Eyerusalem, oh, she's aggressive. Oh, she's irritated. She's always like that. They give us 100 different names because we cannot be calm. We don't have anything to give. So it is very critical for women if we want to see a better world in different shapes and form, we need to take care of ourselves. Remember, self-care does not mean selfishness. These are two different words. Women feel bad and guilty when they focus on themselves. Why? Because the world has taught us it's being selfish. You take care of your brother, you take care of your sister or your whatever, but never once told, in my experience, I've never been told to take care of me. So women don't have that core value, which we call really that is international tragedy. I have traveled around the world in my early years, and I know women were not told to take care of themselves. Even in our practice today, in clinical work, that is what is lacking. If we want to see a better world for our children and our world, we need to start from self-care. Self-care. We give out of abundance of our lives, right? So that's really the title of my talk. Our confidence is so important. Our sense of self has been affected by a lot of external variables. The childhood experiences, the community we came from, the culture we came from, the nuclear family we came from, all these things have affected how we feel about ourselves. It's so important for us to know those things. When we feel down, when we feel not comfortable in whatever work we do. Remember what is going on, what's the triggers. Search within. We need to examine those things. The unspoken messages, the encrypted messages in our brain, they don't leave. They are there to stay. But what is going to make a difference is us being aware, recognize it, challenge it, and change it. That is what needs to happen. So our identity, right? Your core values and strengths. What are your values? What are your strengths? What is that you can say, hey, this is what I value the most? There is no compromise here. I can't compromise. What is that you say in your life? It's so important that you know those things. Celebrate your accomplishment. The world is not gonna say, hey, you did this. No, you remember what your accomplishments are. What are those things you have achieved in the past? That when you stumble right now, what are those things that can be a stepping stone for you instead of being a stumbling block? It's so important for women to celebrate our accomplishments. Take time to reflect and validate. If we mess up, it's a mistake. It doesn't mean we failed. Failure is an event. It is not a person. You remember that. We are very harsh on ourselves when we make mistakes. Why? Because the world exaggerates that too. So we don't want to be measured by someone's ruler. We don't let the world measure us. We refuse by validating and celebrating our own accomplishments. And we stand in our unique place. There is no one like Mamay on this planet called Earth. She is the only one who speaks like Mamay. She is the only one who can lead like Mamay. That's it. If we know how unique we are, if you believe in God, and if you believe in whatever you believe, you are unique. You are unique, created to be only you and you alone. It's important to celebrate the space we have in this world as well by recognizing that. So the imposter syndrome in our clinical work is just, even among ourselves, clinicians, doctors, counselors, the imposter syndrome. What is that? Inability to feel good about your accomplishment. If you are successful in something, oh, it's not a big deal. Oh, so-and-so has done this before. No. We need to celebrate again. We need to validate. We need to separate feelings from facts. Yes, by nature, we are feeling women, but that should not stand on our way of feeling good about things. So we need to separate our feelings from the facts. So you cannot measure yourself by your feelings. You put a feeling in another basket and facts in another, and see what you are dealing with right now, right? Feelings are not facts. We can feel whatever we feel, but that doesn't mean that is true. So pause, and start over. There is always a chance to start over as long as we breathe. Each day is an opportunity to start over. No one is going to encourage us to do that except ourselves as a group, and then the creator who created us to be here for a reason, for a certain time, for a good purpose. That's how we live our lives in order to see a better world, I would say.
Thank you so much. With few minutes to spare, that was really wonderful. So you are unique in the space that you're in. We all are unique, and the place that we hold is unique. There is only one of us in this world, and whatever space that we are in, that is just unique to us. And then from that uniqueness, she did give us some indications as to how we can utilize it to better ourselves and then better the rest of the world. So thank you, Dr. Ganesh. The next panelist is going to be Desta, and please go ahead and introduce yourself. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Mamay. My name is Desta Taye Channel, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I've been here since 1991. I am going to talk a little bit about why it is important that we understand ourselves and accept who we are, and so we are able to shape the future and every opportunity we have to occupy a space. So I was born in Ethiopia, so I was occupying a space and a culture and a family, a country for the first 12 years of my life. And then I came to the States and lived with American families that sponsored me. So then I occupied that space as a not quite adopted, but in a family system. And I lived with that family for 4 years and then moved to another one. And my experience and how I occupied the space for me was as an American. I assimilated because I was living with Americans. And that process is what led me in my own experience to be interested about how we engage with people and who we become. So my work in my last 25 plus years has been in the mental health field, working with families and women in my private practice. And now I currently work at Florence Curtington Services, which is a nonprofit organization that serves pregnant and young women. I am passionate about being alive, right? When we are alive, we make a difference in somebody's life. So what I want to talk today about is, think about a moment that you are somewhere, and then in the next moment where you left that space, right? That void, that nothing space we leave behind when we're not there is as equally important to understand as the space that we find ourselves occupying in any moment. And I think one of the things I want to say, and it's very clearly, is it doesn't matter that you influence at this level that we think we have to arrive, whatever that place is, unless we influence wherever we are, we can't start the steps to move forward into influencing. So, you know, as Dege mentioned, and as Priscilla mentioned, we talked about core values. How are they shaped for us? We talked about just knowing what it is that defines you, right? So I want to kind of ask about, as we navigate our life, how do I show up, right? The me, myself, and I always like that, because the me in a sometimes could be very much like those lizards that change and accommodate. In different situations, we could be different people, we could take on different role, right? And myself, typically, those are the places where we have an understanding of who we are, right? It's internal, me, myself. And then the I is, how do I engage? How do I show up? And so the 4 points I want to talk about today is those things. How do we show up as women, right? How do we listen to the me and myself and I? How do we respond to me, myself and I? And how do we engage with me, myself and I? So the first question I have, and you can think about it for me, is when we talk about how we show up and how we are present right now, those of you who might not be speaking could be somewhere else in your mind, thinking about what someone said before me, or what you're, thinking about something that hit you. But what's the narrative, right? So the narrative is important because we are creating a story in our head about the present moment. And that story is going to impact the energy we begin to feel. If when we agree with people, when we're in community and in a safe place, we've had this positive energy of safety and we could be energized to make change. But when we are not in a place where we feel safe, we could get triggered, right? And so our ability to be anxious impacts our brain and the receptors of how they connect to flight and fly mode. Like when we get scared, our body is immediately saying, danger, danger, watch out for everybody, right? And so when we are in flight mode, we typically are in fight mode of we either have to run or we have to fight. And our brain doesn't have good processing because it's on emergency alert. So it's hyped up and it's not going to do much other than one or two things. And so learning to understand what happens internally to us allows us to be present and be aware of our circumstances. How I listen. When we talk about how I listen, we often think listening has to do with what's in the external, right? What did Mamay say? What did Dage say? What did Desta say? But you can also start to learn to listen to you. You know, someone says something and you can get triggered in one way or another. And so why is it important to listen is we have to get the facts. We have to get what the context in which what we're hearing, both for the contextual, for the history piece or the conversation, but it also implies to you. What's the context of me in this topic? How does that impact me? Am I listening to understand myself and the people I'm with? And do I have an agenda when I'm listening? Am I trying to prove my point or am I again listening to understanding? And have I been triggered by the topic? So we have these different ways that our brain collects, right? We are the sum of our life experiences. We grew up, it's our childhood. We want to be some kind of a professional, it's our educational experience, our career experience. Just kind of like Dage, I liked your thing of just pulling these things out. We engage in a lot of different ways. And as we engage, things get left behind us that either feed our core value or challenge our core value, or really makes us realize we don't know something and we want to learn, or we're like, no way, Jose, I'm done with that. I don't want to say anything. So that's how we formulate the path in which we decide to go, to study, to learn. And the third one is then how do I respond with everything that I've learned, everything that I am, and you know, and what are the things that I'm going to impact in the way that I have brought all the person that I am here in this moment for this subject, for this purpose, right? And does my lived experience serve me in this moment to be wise, to think thoroughly and mindfully, or does it initiate in me an emotion that brings up a lot of emotions that I haven't dealt with potentially, or I have? And I think there's a difference between passion and anger, right? Mm-hmm. The question is going to be, how do I want to show up? No one can tell you how you want to show up in a situation. That's your choice to show up how you choose. What I'm trying to talk about is, do you walk in that intentionally, or do you walk in that without thinking about your capacity to respond in a way that's intentional versus react in a way that's not intentional? And then lastly, it's how do I engage? Am I clear about my purpose of engagement? I just want to say about this, what's really important is we have many mindless engagements all day long, right? We go get gas, we talk to the grocery person, we talk to the person, we pass people in the hallway. We have a lot of engagement. And believe it or not, even those little engagements add up to give us a lot of sense of self out of that conversation. Someone can greet us and say, hey, how are you doing? And be really nice. Or someone could flip you off on your way to work, right? So any little engaging with other humans face to face could really set us in a different tone that we even started. So when we engage, recognizing that we need to be very clear about what's my purpose in the way I speak with someone, or if I'm in a meeting, or if I'm with my daughter or my husband, your purpose has to be defined for you. So who defines that purpose for you, right? How do I create an equal space for others with whom I engage? I think over my years, the very space I want to occupy is always going to be challenged by those who also want to occupy my space with me, right? Either in solidarity or in opposition or in just physical space. But in all that space, what's my stand as far as knowing what my space is and honoring the space for others? And I think this is an important piece as we are in such a time where there's a lot of challenging problems, and in order for us to solve those problems, we have to be able to hold the space for challenges and be able to figure out how to do that. And lastly, you know, every opportunity you have to engage, we have to be able to ask ourselves, is there a purpose for me in that moment? And have I been able to be worthy of that purpose for me?
Thank you, Desta. Just listening to you, I was thinking about time. You know, we're talking about space and, you know, how do I show up and how do I listen and how do I respond and then how do I engage? So we're talking about owning the space that we're in, whatever it may be. We all occupy different spaces at different times. So time being the essence. That's really powerful. But thank you so much for that. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next person, Eyerusalem. Welcome, Eyerusalem. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here with you guys. I'm learning a lot of things, so that's exciting. So my name is Eyerusalem. I am a Pan-Africanist and a more recent community activist. I received my master's in health system management from Grand Canyon University, and I currently work for a health system organization. And I'm excited to talk a little bit about the type of future millennials foresee and how they contribute in shaping the future. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot of good and bad things about millennials. Millennials are the largest generation in America. We're also the most educated and the most diverse generation so far. But half of us were raised by divorced parents. And looking at, what shaped our worldview, right? We grew up in a technological revolution era, the smartphones, the Airbnb, the Uber age, where we had a lot of technology and social media, and also a lot of other social impacts, right? We had 9/11, the Afghan and Iraq war, climate change, and then we had recession in 2009. And so where there was just a lot of things that impacted us in different way and shaped our view of the world and how we operate within that as we were growing up. And in the early stage, it might not have been, we might not have realized it, but it's the constant 24-hour news and the social media use. And it seems at least, like all of my generation have at least one social media network where we try to engage with the world as well as the people around us. And so when it comes to social issues, we're very liberal and optimistic, right? And we're most likely to speak out against injustice. We're aware of the disadvantages of the structural disadvantages of women, as well as social and workplace disadvantage, right? We're inspired by the Me Too movement, as well as the pay gap between men and women. And so there has been a lot of things that had somewhat formed our perception of what the world is. and then also gender equality. And so, but we also see, how do we narrow this gap, right? And how do we make a better future for the next generation coming up? And then also, it's not just about me, but what about the rest of the world that live around the world, right? So a lot of globalization aspects of it, now I have the right to vote. Now I have the right to, potentially get a leadership position within the Western world. But how about someone living in Africa? How about someone living in Asia? And so what that looks like and how that shapes our society. And then also, like using social media again to network, right? Different platforms to network with people around the world. Also focusing on intersectionality, right? How am I more affected because, I'm an African American or I'm an Asian. And so different aspects of that and how that affects us in securing our position within the society. And then also, I think my generation, we tend, I know sometimes it can be perceived as negative, but we challenge the status quo and we're constantly seeking feedback from our leaders, right? And so, and those are some of the things that we've been able to do. But I think another big thing is women empowerment, right? Because I think like that's one of the things that I want to focus on today is how do we empower women, right? Because it's very essential because women are, starting from home, right? How they're able, if we're able to empower women, and have them, have their vision and they're satisfied with their life, they're educated, and they're able to share their view of different things, they're able to, create a healthier life, create a social development for families, right? Better communication for their society and community, and as well as their country, because they're directly impact their children, their husband, as well as the society that they operate in. And so I guess it would be, it's very important as we continue to get deeper into globalization, as well as the different generation coming in, and our generation comprises about 75% of the workplace. And so as we go on, how do we continue to empower women, not just within our society, but also in other countries and other places, and continue to help them fulfill and be productive in their life so they can reach their full potential and contribute to the generation or to the community that they live in.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm sure we'll come back to you with some questions. For millennials, we do know and hear different perspectives and different opinions. I think being in that space, and how do you occupy that space, and how do you recognize it, how do you embrace it, just being, identified as millennials, like I said earlier, time itself has brought you to where you're at, where technology kind of changed everything, and the way you see things is different. And you said you like to challenge the status quo. So in that, how do we shape the world? It is a generation behind you, there is a generation around you. How do you kind of embrace that? How do you occupy that in a way that shapes the next generation? So thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next panelist. Mahder is going to be talking to us about the current position African women hold in society. So Mahder, please take a minute, introduce yourself, and then take your 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mamay, for organizing this, and fellow panelists. I'm really humbled to be here with you. And as Eyerusalem said, I'm also learning a lot. My name is Mahder H Serekberhan. I was born and raised in Ethiopia. I'm currently finishing up my MA in Pan-African Studies at Syracuse University. I was happy to hear Eyerusalem say she's a Pan-Africanist, because so am I. I work with the Pan-African Congress of North America. So my themes are all interconnected, and I believe all speakers have highlighted this in one way or another. And I wanted to talk about these 4 points in relation to occupying space, making space, and connecting and using our spaces. So my first point, redefining. So I believe there is this need to redefine and examine what is meant by women. And Eyerusalem brought this up in relation to the structural positions women hold. Because as I sit here and consider my space as a young African scholar and one of the top institutions in the United States, I'm also fully aware that some women who are also African and are also in the United States are working minimum wage jobs. Some are staying at home taking care of the families. Some are working as domestic workers. Some are facing violence in refugee camps. And others are some of the top doctors and academics in the US. So when I say redefining, I really mean like we need to contextualize what we mean by women and when we use that word. I believe this is a huge component of recognizing our space because who we are, it needs to be contextualized. And another point which would lead me to my second bullet point of recognizing is this need to redefine womanhood. For too long, women's subordination and exploitation has been justified through rigid and narrow definitions and representations of womanhood. Whether we look at how womanhood is made synonymous with the reproduction of life or with the role of taking care of the family, or even how womanhood is made synonymous with the nation or the pride of the community. And these descriptions have truth. You know, women do, you know, give a lot of pride to the community. Women are mothers, women are all these things, but I think they're too often used to oppress and exploit women. So they're used to keep women out of public sectors like politics and economy. They're used to keep women doing labor intensive and care work without compensation or value. They're also used to weaponize violence against women in war and conflict where women are targeted intentionally because they represent the pride or sanctity of the community. So they are raped and killed, and the communities they are from also refuse them. So I believe as women, we can and should redefine our womanhood in all its complexities and interconnections. This relates to our theme today because I believe it is necessary to define ourselves within the spaces we occupy. And echoing Dr. Degnish, I say we should not let people measure us, but we should define ourselves. And I think this applies to us as a group. So my second point, recognizing, is kind of what I've already talked about, but it's in recognizing the space we are in and the roles we are playing. And I believe with recognition comes value. I was recently rewatching Ethiopian laureate Tsagay Gabramedin's interview, and he said Ethiopia is essentially a matriarchy. He talked about the role women play in their communities, from those like Aitu who led the war to everyday women running households, markets, and communities. I mean, I was raised by a mother who was a breadwinner and a caregiver, you know, although the world did not recognize her as both. So in many ways, I would say the world is kind of an unrecognized matriarchy. This is not to disregard like deformed masculinity and patriarchy or the super exploitation of women, but to recognize the roles women are playing in society. I mean, women weave the social fabric, you know, they subsidize wage, they do care work in forms of taking care of children, taking care of their parents, their husbands. They mourn on behalf of communities. I know in cultures like Ethiopia, women are the mourners. They are farmers. About 80% of food in Africa is produced by women. And this fact is true in many different contexts as well. They give life. Dr. Degnish, I think, gave us a good demonstration through that cup of water of how much women do give and are central to our communities. So I believe empowering women is really recognizing and valuing women's work and their roles, which are already sustaining our community. In fact, I think COVID-19 has brought to the surface the concept of essential workers. You know, these are people we overlook and undervalue, and many of them are women. According to the National Women's Center, women occupy 70% of health and social care workforce, which often includes essential but low-wage jobs. So my question is, when we empower women, why are we not asking for, why are women undervalued? Why do they occupy the most lowest wage jobs in our communities? And these numbers are often true in the global South and the global North. This goes back to the need to define women. You know, Black and brown women are disproportionately represented as essential workers. So this kind of relates to my other pinpoint, which is politics and economy. We talk about women participating in these spheres, but in reality, it is like we say women are excluded from politics and economy. They're not like engaged in these fields, but I think it's the commonly accepted definitions of these concepts that make it seem like that. I personally do not know one woman from the community I came from who that does not work and that does not work hard at that. Really look around you. Women are central to our economies, even when they're just doing housework in the nuclear family. That is work necessary to allow the man to go to work. And even in politics, aren't the women of our communities the ones that negotiate peace, that talk amongst each other and navigate social life? Last week, I was participating in another Zoom discussion on Libya and NATO's destruction. And a fellow scholar talked about women from a specific area in Libya and how they organized a commission amongst conflicting communities to talk over coffee and negotiate peace. And this is a militarized region, but women are discussing peace as a cup of coffee. So my question is that not politics? So this idea that empowerment is lifting women up can be obscuring. I believe within the space I occupy, empowering women means revealing their realities and their centrality to sustaining life in our communities. As an academic, I plan to use my space to write about women's realities. I think that is my responsibility because the ideas around us and our inferiority and incapacity are based on the obscurity of our realities. So this brings me to my last point, and this is essentially what I mean by solidarity. I think we need to build solidarity within and across the different spaces we occupy, because these different spaces are central to society. I think as women who have access to resources and whose social progress, whether it's our education or our location in the US, has given us visibility, being effective in our space, to me, is making sure that our work is always considerate of the realities of women who do not have the access and resources that we do. I believe that is how we can be effective with our space. Effectiveness for me really raises the question, how can I use my space and the access and resources and privileges in that space to go beyond affecting change in my own space? So thank you. That summarizes all that I have had to say. And thank you once again, Mamay.
Absolutely, thank you. We all occupy space. What we do with it is what matters. And I think you've touched on so many points, and I don't want to take away from the question time, but it's so good to have all of you guys, such powerful women, occupying space, and what to do with it, recognizing it. I mean, as long as we're alive, we occupy space one way or another, right? We are in the space right now, this space, this panel discussion, sharing our experiences, sharing our thoughts, and recognizing space. And I agree with Dr. Ganesh giving us that vivid demonstration of the empty glass. What happens when the glass is empty? There's got to be a glass to be taking stuff out of, correct? So I'm so excited. I've learned a lot. This is great discussion. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead now invite Dr. Akre to go ahead and facilitate our next session. Please welcome Dr. Akre.
This was a wonderful, wonderful presentation by a number of incredibly powerful, well-educated women. We've had great discussions about theory. We've had great discussions about what could be. We've talked about millennials, and I have to tell you, as someone who works in the technology industry, I love my millennials. They have brought a challenge to what was otherwise a dinosaur of industry. And they have challenges towards us that make us better. And so I greatly appreciate what millennials have brought to our organization. But I want to turn a little different direction now, because we've talked a lot about theory. We've talked a lot about, how we develop as women. But what I'd like to know is, how do we take all of this aggregate of knowledge and help other women who have not had the blessings and the ability to go to school, to have these kinds of experiences? Because it takes all women. It's not just those of us who have led privileged lives. So what are we doing as women who have had this privilege to help other women who have not? I would challenge all of you to share, what are you doing in your lives? Because I know you're doing something. And I think with an audience, that's what they want to know. What are we doing to better other individuals and to help them find their passion and to help them find what it is that they were created to do?
Oh, I'll go first. I think it's really important that we expand our reach. This is a perfect example of where we come together, we learn from each other, iron sharpens iron, and then we make it a mission where we're intentionally going out and talking to someone that was not a part of this conversation today. And that we are explicit in saying, okay, after we're done with this Zoom call, how can you go out into your community and teach someone else about how to find their voice? There's so many ideas here in this conversation. And I started my presentation by talking about how the Bible talks about how the older women are supposed to teach the younger women. So, you know, we have all of these beautiful young ladies who are strengthening their voice and being aware of other people. And it's so important to learn how to not only be a listener, but then take action to problem solve the things that are around us. And it takes a certain amount of respect in order to say, okay, like not everybody thinks the way I think, not everybody feels the way I feel, but we have to live together in this community. And how do we do that in the most respectful and thoughtful way? And we have to allow people to have a certain number of freedoms, because, you know, my mother's an immigrant, my husband is an immigrant, so many of the panelists here are immigrants. And so we're coming from all over the globe with different experiences. And so how do we respect that? And I think that's an important part of the conversation of saying, I respect you, you respect me, and then how can we coexist and make our communities better and stronger? And so it's got to take a lot of intentionality and effort to do that.
Absolutely, Priscilla. I greatly appreciate those comments. I think it also takes courage. I think women need to find their courage, and when we're finding our voice, to go out and reach out to help others who have not had the same type of experiences. Does anybody else have comments that they would like to make?
Yeah, I'll just say a few things. I think one of the most important things we could do is, in every situation, that we have an opportunity to be influencers on behalf of the labels that's put upon others who might not be privileged to have been educated and have had different experiences, is that we create the space for respect for them by being vocal wherever we are, in all the different communities we occupy, when topics that influence decision-making around how women are seen or how they're not, that we take it upon ourselves to let them know that when their voice might not be in our space, that by being there, we have their voice. And so we have to be very knowledgeable about the challenges women have. That's all.
Anybody else?
I would like to go, just because what Desta said is basically what I want to say. And my answer will fall back on my bullet point of recognizing. And like, my mother taught me more than any academic institution, you know? So what I do is ensure that her lessons and her teachings come out in my academic writing, because academia has disregarded her knowledge, her ability to give knowledge, to provide knowledge. So my responsibility and what I'm doing is I ensure wherever I am, her voice, her teachings will be in my writing, because I tell you, there's not a book, a theory I've read that she has not discussed with me. You know, I see my role as just ensuring that her knowledge is also recognized as something that needs to be taught, that needs to be, you know, as Priscilla said, like transferred from one person to the next generation. Because I mean, you have 80% of farmers in Africa farming. And so you can't tell me that I can tell those women how to live life, how to succeed, because they're feeding me. They're ensuring that I'm living and I'm succeeding. So I think my role is just to really make that reality visible. Thank you.
I think that's important. And I think that the point that I would like to also make is that there are a number of individuals, particularly women, who do not have access to those books. And so therefore they cannot read them. Many of them cannot read. And yet they hold the most important job in the world. As far as I'm concerned, there is no more important job than being a mother. You are shaping the next generation. You are shaping the world. So again, I go back to, we have had the privilege of this education. How are we reaching out to those women in areas that education is not available? How do we reach out to those incredibly powerful women who really carry a nation on their backs as we see them going from the field to the house? What is it that we, as a group of powerful women who have been afforded, in my belief, by God, the responsibility to help other women in other areas? What are we as a group doing? What are the solutions that we are looking for to make this a better world?
Dr. Akre, there
Yes.
is a question maybe that could be also discussed in together with what you just said off of the Facebook. So it says, for those of us men who want to become better ally, what do you recommend we do?
Do the panelists want to answer that?
I think, I really greatly appreciate the question that was just asked by a man. I say little by little, a little is a lot. There are a lot of organizations in this country, in the United States, that work with educating women, for example, in Ethiopia. One of them that comes to my mind that I'm a part of is called Girls Rising. If you Google Girl Rising, they go to the most rural areas in other developing nations too, including India and other places, to educate women, girls, so that they have an opportunity to go to school. That is one. And the other piece I just learned recently is, being in the United States, we can still be a part of a family that is struggling, that doesn't have a name of an organization, but be involved. Find a way to connect with poor families who do not have anything in this rich nation and are struggling. So I think there is a mission field right here in our neighborhoods if we open our eyes, I would say.
And I would like to tag on to what Dr. Worku said as well. I think it's as simple as asking women our thoughts and including our voices in a conversation, because once again, there are blind spots in decision making and policy making. And when you include our voices, you bring more strength and more power to policies that are more inclusive. And so just keeping in mind, we want men to be men. At least that's my viewpoint. I love a strong man who's decisive and who's a leader. And I have a lot of respect for men and fathers. And there's definitely a place in our society and an order to that. But it's also important for men to consider what we have to say. And I think they will be better off for that. And so just asking us what we think about something and including us at the table, and not trying to always speak for us, but allowing us to speak.
Great.
Yeah, I think what I would say, I go back to this space we continue to talk about. Men create and hold a very different space than women. And when you have the capacity to influence your space with a lot more men, think about how you're impacting the world with the way you're viewing women, right? The Western world really does not do justice to women who are not educated as summing them. We tend to label women and their value to the way we put value to education, to advancement of whatever that is, right? And often our system is created by men who have defined what that is. And so I think creating the opportunity for your discussions with other men, but most importantly, by leading by example on how to create a space for women in every possible opportunity you may have. Like, you know, Priscilla said, ask what they think about what their experience might be and how different it might be, and be interested in what that is, instead of continuing to create a space that is only allowed to be open because we have proven by going through some level of step to be equitably enough to speak to. So there's a power differential of how spaces are created, you know, and we begin at home. How are you treating your wife, your sister, your mother, right? And young people needing to have that same respect, because the world right now doesn't really create that space for women. And so I do believe you are a very powerful, influential space to make a difference, but you have to begin from your home to your world, meaning like your office space, your community, and other men who may not share the same thought, and challenging them and creating that space to have that conversation and changing the shift of bias, basically, is how I would say.
Right.
Yeah, and I just want to add one last thing. And I think also, you know, like how can you contribute to empowering women, right? Like Desta said, it starts from home, right? And earlier, Dr. Erk talked about, you know, coming from the field into the home, right? What can you do in the house, right? Maybe it's sharing of duties in the house to help support the mother, right? And how that can help empower her, promote self-worth, speak out against inequality at work, right? I got promoted, I make more than you. Maybe you should negotiate your salary differently, right? So it's those different conversation that would, I think, potentially help elevate the relationship between the two, and also make you a great ally, so that we are able to empower more women.
Yeah. So being intentional, I think has something to do with it. Just being intentional, be aware.
So I wanted to say something about what are we doing to help women, and I can quickly introduce myself. My name is Rahma Sahle. I'm a junior at Syracuse University, so Mahder and I go to the same school. And I'm Ethiopian. I was born and raised in Ethiopia, and I came to Syracuse for school, to the US for school. So I'm also a writer, and I write poetry. I write in Amharic, and I'm still trying to find my footing as a writer, but generally I strive to revive a certain backbone that I think, more generally than even beyond just looking at women as a society, especially referring to like back home in Ethiopia, I fear that some people have lost a sense of self that has almost been taken away from them for various circumstances in their lives. And to sort of revive, again, a person's backbone, and to say, which is very much on theme with what we're discussing on this panel about finding your space and taking your space, and to say that you exist, you matter, and you're taking up space, and to help people acknowledge themselves. So with that being said, one of the poems I wrote for Women's Day, March 8th, it's originally in Amharic. It's pretty short. I can recite it if you want, but it generally acknowledges that first and foremost, women are human, and in society, we should be looked at as human beings, but also we should turn around to ourselves and say, we are human, and we need to give ourselves that space, and we need to acknowledge that we do take space, and that it's okay to turn to yourself and listen to yourself, and to hopefully, to any woman to turn to herself and be strengthened by what she has in her heart and what she wants to do with her life, and that it's okay to have a sense of agency in her life. And so referring to what I'm trying to do to help women is, I think it's necessary to help a woman and even generally help a person look to themselves and help themselves see value in themselves and be strengthened by themselves. And I think once you can achieve that, it's very easy to kind of help them. They can just take it from there, you know. So that's what I wanted to add.
Esther, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Roma. I think in essence, you know, any flower needs nurture to show its beauty. Every seed has its potential, but it needs all that is necessary to bloom. And I think that's what you're talking about, you know, reiterating that we all have an opportunity to find a space for any woman in our community, in our life, anywhere. You know, if we have the seed, which is who she is, what is it that we can participate in nurturing that flower to her beauty? And I think it's just an honor for us to have been where we have in our own lives and stories. And so I get excited about the opportunity to bring any woman alongside to do the same for her.
Rahama, I would really like to thank you. I think that was very well said. And I'd like to go back a little bit to the idea of feelings and facts that Dr. Worku talked about. First of all, we need to recognize, and I know Dr. Worku recognizes this, that we are first feeling beings that think. We do not think first and then feel. And as women, we have the ability to be empathetic and compassionate. If you look at the research that is being done now, what is desired most in the workplace in leaders is compassion, empathy, the ability to recognize and understand what it is that people bring to an organization. That puts us in a very interesting position. How are all of us utilizing those skills of ours? Because I consider, you know, our ability to work with individuals and build relationships an amazing skill. How are we as women using that to not only better our workplaces, but to better the environment around us?
It's a very good question. That is really what we do in our clinical work to help women to balance intellect and emotions. Yes, we are feeling people, we do feel with compassion, all those good things. That is when the question comes about the glass I have showed you. It is great to be compassionate, but there is also called the scientific word compassion fatigue, right? So yeah, we give, and then we don't have anything more to give, then we break. So just like what Desta said a while ago, how do we want to show up? What is the feeling in me right now at this moment, at this space? What are the feelings that are helpful and not so helpful? What are those things based on my feelings? Feelings are valid, okay? There is no good or bad feelings. You have a right to feel whatever you want to feel perfectly. However, what you do with those feelings is a key, right? What can I control? And what can I not control? Things under your control, you do them. You do them wisely. You take care of yourself and you move forward to create a space for you and for others behind you. things that you cannot control, you can't break your head or hit your head against a brick wall. Find another way, reach out, connect with others who can do those things that you cannot do. So that's when I say feelings from facts. It is so important to validate what you feel. Great, you felt angry. It's okay. But how can you not be those things? Because it does stand on your way of helping others, much less yourself. That's what I meant.
That's great.
Debora, I love this question because there's so many generalities about us as women, like we're too emotional and can we have nerves of steel? It reminds me of when I was a principal, and after Columbine, we had triage training for a shooter. And so when you're the leader, you can't fall apart. If there's an active shooter in my school, I have to triage and prioritize who's going to get help first. And it taught me, first of all, the respect first responders who have to remain calm, right? And so is that a reason why we don't see as many female leaders? Because there's this perception that we cannot be in control in a crisis. And that's a real generality that we see. But I also, to your original question, I think about what do we need to take care of before we get to the content of whatever it is we're talking about, that emotional piece. And I go back to my Bible and I see Jesus Christ was a perfect example. He always made sure that people were fed. If they were hungry, if they were sick, they were healed, and then he taught. So he even understood how important it is for us to make sure that the needs of people are taken care of before we get into the content part of what we're talking about. And so I think there is an opportunity for us as women to find that balance, because what do we teach kids? It's like, before you ask me for something, you could say, hi, how are you doing? Like, how was your day? And consider the other person before we get straight into a request or something heavy. And I think that's something that we can model as women, making sure that people are doing okay, that we care about them as people, as human beings, and then we get into the work, because that's such a valuable place for us to be as human beings as we're interacting with one another, just showing respect for one another.
And care. That is really important. Mamay, may I digress and talk about something that happened when I was in Africa?
Absolutely.
All right. The reason I asked that question is I lived and taught in Kenya, and I've been there for about 20 years now. And one of the things that happened when I was teaching is I saw that my students they didn't have the ability to concentrate. And so I finally got to the point where I said, so help me to understand. I'm not Kenyan. I am a guest in your country. I need your help. I'm not equipped to do this. I'm not equipped to help you at this point because I don't understand what's happening. And one of my students said, I'm hungry. I can't concentrate. One of my other students said, every class I've been in, I have been beaten when I ask a question. One of my other students said, you're white. I feel less than. Before I could teach them business theory, management theory, I had to teach them that they had worth. I had to let them know that God doesn't make mistakes, that they had value. But before I could do any of that, like Priscilla said, they had to be fed. I was one of 3 female professors. The men didn't care I'm sorry, it's not part of their nature. It's not a negative. I had my students for 2 hours every day. The first half hour, we ate bananas and sweet potatoes and cookies. Then we talked, then we exercised, and then I taught. Women see those things. Men necessarily or do not necessarily see them. I'm not going to categorize all men. The other thing I would like to share with you, the call from the gentleman who wanted to know what he as a man could do. Tell your daughters, tell your sisters, tell the women in your lives that they are capable and that they have everything that they need to contribute to this world in any way possible. I was very blessed. I am also an immigrant to the United States. My father retired when I was in 3rd grade. It was my father that was at home after school. It was my father who told me, Debora, don't let anybody tell you you can't do something. He said again, God gave you everything that you need to make a difference in this world. It is your responsibility to use those gifts that you've been given. So that is what I taught my son to share with his sons. It's what, if you're wondering why this person is even on this discussion, it's because of Mamay. It's what I shared with Mamay when she became part of our family. Those are the things that men can do. And I think as women, we have a responsibility to pass those on to other people because we are the heart and soul of a country, of a city, of a school, and of a family. That's who we are. Comments on how maybe some of you were raised, because I see you all as being very strong. So how did your upbringing play a part in this?
I came from a family that are from different ethnic tribes. I came from, my mom is from one ethnic tribe and my dad was from another. However, my father was raised by a single mom. So I came from a family of 8, only 2 boys. So my father always told us girls, you can do anything you want to do, because he loved his mom and he saw the strength that she had raising him in a different tribal community away from the known. So just growing up, I never ever once thought that women were less than. I never heard of that. Yeah. I always knew I can do whatever I want to do. He always added, as long as you respect others, demand respect back. And that's what I have done. Luckily, I've been married for 30-some years to a man who celebrates women and loves women. And luckily, I have 2 strong daughters again. So this is my thing.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to actually add a comment on this, just listening to everybody and what we're talking about, at least sharing my own experience. I grew up in a household that believed in education. My father, 100%, always pushed in education. He always encouraged us to work hard, and we did the best that we can. I remember as a child growing up, we will be standing before him, you know, from the oldest to the youngest. What do you want to be when you grow up? There is another show for that. I won't get into it, but honestly, just being even asked that question, it kind of helps you think about what it is you want to be, you know, have a plan. and then the influence from the oldest to the youngest. So there's like 9 siblings, from the very first one to by the time it got to me, I'm like, what's there, left for me? And every one of them came saying certain things, and that role model was put in front of us, from just listening to even my own oldest sister saying, this is what I'm going to be. And they went ahead and did what it is that they were going to do. And to this day, I'm still trying to get there. But I think education really matters. I have had people in my life that reiterated, instilled the value of education. And I don't mean just going to school so that you have a title and then you become somebody. It really is allowing education to expand your thought process, expand your outlook towards life itself, and to really be what it is that we're talking about today, to have to be in that space and be okay in that space, whatever the space that we occupy. Somebody had said earlier, God did not make a mistake. He created us knowing what it is that he was doing, right? And we are not in the space that we are in today in an accident. It's a space. We're in it for however long, for a season. The point is what contributed to who we are. I mean, the teachers that we even listened to growing up. I still remember some of my teachers. Some I don't necessarily care about to remember, but then I focus on what is important, what helped me, what motivated me. We all have people in our lives. And, once again, for the gentleman that asked the question, what an amazing question to ask. How can we be a better supporters, a better ally? Education is big. It really gives you the opportunity. You learn different perspectives. You get to see the world differently. You get to see and appreciate the space you're in. And that's the reason why we're doing this.
And then I think for me, my parents divorced when I was young. And so seeing my mom navigate herself through a society and through life, and I think I was able to build a certain toughness, right? And this idea that I am in charge of my destiny, and being empowered by her to go after what I need. And then she was also a really big believer in education, and so she's always constantly make sure you keep on going. But one thing I learned from her is also like you set your destination, right? And there is nothing that can stop you as long as you have the determination to go after it. And so I think that mentality has brought me far, and I think it's really important to share that to other women around, just so they know that, they are in charge of the destination, right? They're empowered enough to go after the things that they want in life.
That's terrific. I'd also like to follow up a little bit on what Dr. Worku said, which is very important. We don't have to go a great distance to find people who need our help. There are people that are next door that need our help. Finding young women who need mentors, being willing to be that mentor it's our next generation. I remember one time I was working in a school and helping the principal with some issues, and she said, "You have so much patience with these young people." I said, "Yeah, because I don't know which one's going to be the heart surgeon that's working on me when I'm 70 years old. I want to make sure that person knows what they're doing and cares." And so, and again, that goes back to, the role of being that mother figure. I mean, that's really what that's part of who we are. I'd also like to go back, Dr. Worku, I found it very interesting when you talked about women and the inability to feel good about what we have done. It's so true. I talk to women all the time, particularly because I my world right now is not only Africa, but also, our technology company. And for women, what they've done is they never see it as good enough. And yet a man can celebrate the least little thing. Help me to understand further, because where does that come from? I just find it very interesting.
The study talked a little bit about how the brain works.
Right.
That is our training. We are trained in this thing. So from day one, that is really where we got the messages. The messages, I don't remember a time for many women, like I said, I grew up in a little bit a different household, but for women, that you can do this, you can go hunt, you can go do that. So whatever messages we have been getting, even when pre-verbal, even science talks about, even kids before they start talking verbally, whatever they have been hearing is registered in their brain. So whatever messages from the day we started interacting with this world, we got that we knew about or we didn't know about, our brain knows those things. The brain has been saving and saving and saving for however long we lived. So that's really what happens. You know, our body keeps the score. It never forgets. You don't know, but you do know. Your body knows, your brain knows. It's encrypted there, it's there. So when things happen, I was like, oh, you cannot do that. Remember, you have been told that when you were 3 years old. Huh? You know, you don't know why you are saying what you are saying, putting yourself down and not celebrating your accomplishment. But there is this saved memories over the years that is screaming out loud, telling you you cannot celebrate that. No, 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 no. That's not territory that you can go to, you know. That's really what is happening. To be honest, it's really sad. But for us to be aware and to get a forum like this to talk about it is a key. Now science even talks about still in the womb, kids do know what it means to be stressed. When mom is stressed, when mom and dad fight, the kiddos in the womb know. It's scary, but that's where it's coming from.
You know, I want to quick say something about the brain. You know, how many of you guys have taken a shortcut to some place in your neighborhood and all of a sudden after a while there's an actual pathway, right, that has diverted from where it normally is? And so basically in retro, since we are in the womb all the way up to 3 years old and moving forward, our brain develops differently in these times of growth. So 0 to 3 is huge, right? And then it continues to go right around adolescent time. It's huge. And those pathways that connect, right? Every time we experience something, our body takes, well, you're in the tech field, right? It synthesizes all experience and it's taking it in and dictating as to the responses of each. And it remembers on how to then be prepared for the next time it happens, right? And so the same way is which is why it's so important for us to dismantle old systems way of thinking and start then to diverge into new, right? That's why we need to create the path. And I think Mahder said it so beautifully around redefining women is we have to carry, for me to make it a better future. And what I love about the young women I serve where I work is they're walking around with a potential that nobody has ever recognized for them. They show up every day. These are young women who are traveling by bus and train, holding a young baby, facing the world because they want to improve their life and they want to be someone. And every single one of them will say to me, Miss, I want to be an example to my daughter, right? And they're going to be more than that. They're amazing, but there has not been lived experience or others who can breathe positivity and blessings in their lives. And so they then are basically impacted by the system that they know. And so it is our responsibility as we redefine who a woman is, as we show up as moms in the workplace, as we show us as intellect, as young, as beautiful, as our millennial kiddos who are in these academic spaces, you know, I was told when I was in college that I was a woman stuck in a man's mind. Help me understand that, right? Is that because, and the person basically said, because I was logical and, you know, I can hold my own conversation. And so listen to the bias that is being created and about that. And so I think we need to be very clear and understanding when God created us all, he did it equally. And just because he defined our role in the moment of being helpful did not equate for us to being invisible. And we got taken out of the equation by those who received our help and not seeing us as equals. And so I think there's a lot to unpack in that particular statement. But I think going back to, we have to help rewrite, you know, our neural pathways of our young women to make them understand we are a spiritual and a physical and a emotional being that needs to utilize all our created being to be able to fully meet our potential, and we're capable of doing that.
Yeah, it's creating different synaptic connections is what it is. That's what we're looking at doing. You know, I have to share with you just quickly a quick analogy that I've been thinking about. I see a lot of wonderful young women who are willing to celebrate, you know, some of the achievements that they have done. They look at them, you know, and say, hey, look what I've done. And I have to wonder about the participation of more women in sports. Because in the sports world, that's right, I can do this, I'm great, look at me, look at all my muscles, all of this stuff. And I wonder if that is not having some effect on, I see more young women willing to celebrate because they've been in that kind of an environment. I have no idea, I just put that out there. But I do want to get back to one other thing. Some of the things that we've talked about are the what could be of generations past. I'm really curious as to what we as women see as what could be. And then whenever you look at that, particularly when we look at it from in the technology industry, you know, what could be, we then have to we have to mind map it backwards. What are we doing to make sure that what could be is actually happening?
I want to make a comment about what Desta said because it triggered a thought as well because of the bias. Like we're talking about mothers who we've created this social norm that it's not enough to be a housewife or a mom. Even when I ask women that I don't know, like, what do you do? And if they're not working outside of the home, you could see their demeanor change because they're like, oh, well, I don't work outside of the home. So we need to figure out how we can value and elevate how important that role is as a mother, and that it's enough to be a mom. You don't have to have a big career outside of the home to be valued. But if there is a space for you to be able to do both, I mean, I think the most important community is the family. It starts there. And when that is strong, then we can see our communities be strong as well. So I want to thank Desta for triggering that thought in me, because partially we do it to ourselves as women, because, you know, here we're a group of, you know, strong, career-minded, politically involved women, and we're just like, you know, Shira. But when it comes to these women who are smart and they are capable and they're taking care of their family, how do we also make that an equally valuable role? So that was my thought that I wanted to tag on to.
I just want to really interject really quickly and say something. one of the things that I was thinking about quite a lot in planning this panel discussion when talking about space, the thing that I kept coming back to is space from the home. Like, it's actually the most important space a woman can hold. It's the most important space a woman can occupy, because women is putting out the generation. Women, you know, there is a saying in Amharic, and I just don't know how to say it in English, but in English, there is similar saying, behind every successful man, there is a very strong woman, right? So it's important. I just want to touch base on the fact that sometimes when we see women that don't necessarily could say, oh yeah, I've got this kind of education, that kind of education, and I have this kind of title, or I hold this kind of position, you know, that's when we see the little bit of the tracking back and the retreating and taking away from them. But who put out that generation? Who is actually beginning to create that generation from the house? You know, when I think about it, it brought me back to when I first found out I was pregnant with my first child. And I said, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? Because I'm trusted for another life. The thing that I want to bring up here is, from before that baby was able to start talking, Dr. Ganesh said it, from when they were in our bellies, we took care of them. I mean, the way I walked was different. I couldn't even get home the day I found out I had life in me, because, oh my God, every car that was coming, I was trying to get away from, because now I'm responsible for that life, right? From the time that they started looking up and recognizing me, they started talking, crawling, and doing all that stuff. My fear was I could do this wrong, or I could do it right. Did I do it wrong, or did I do it right? They're out in college being their own person now, and they are who they are. And so every now and then I stop to think, did I do it right? Oh my gosh, did I do it right? Or did I do it wrong? Because women from home were putting out the next generation. What they become is what they started from home, right? It started from right here, and being okay in that space is what I really want to echo today. I mean, it is okay. We could be more things if we can, and we're given the opportunity. But I think being okay in that space is trying to get away from us, and I think we need to embrace it. I just wanted to say that.
I think that's really important. Yeah, our first responsibility is to keeping our children safe.
I quickly just jump in, because like I've been dying to just comment on what you guys were saying, because I really want to add that personal beliefs as well. I do not believe that we are born inherently with different capacities of feeling. You know, I think Dr. Worku was right, like feelings are human, so everybody feels, but the extent to how we feel, I think, is really relates to how we're socialized. I think everyone's testimony about their families shows that certain roles educate us. So I think our roles as mothers, we are in touch with more humanness, compassion. Those are things that are necessary if you are to be a mother. So I think specific roles kind of socialize us to feeling, to acting a specific way. And honestly, I think men should consider solidarity as seeing it as like they also need to be liberated. I have men friends who are so compassionate, so loving, so caring. You know, normally they've been raised by strong mothers, so they don't fear those qualities as not being strong qualities. They actually appreciate those qualities. So I really ask, like, this takes me back to my presentation, like, why do we not value care? Like, that is the feeling that sustains the world, and everybody has a capacity to feel it. Why do we, like nurses, these social workers, they're paid, these are low-paying jobs. Why doesn't the world recognize the value of care? Because that would inherently mean valuing women. Because I agree that we also like internalize these inferior views of ourselves. But I think were we in a world that did not consistently attack us, we would be in a much better place to look at ourselves lightly. So I do want to take us back to like, why do we not value these things that everyone has agreed are important to lead a business, to lead a community? These are central things, but we are not like talking about how they're not valued and they're not compensated even in the market or the politics or the economics of our world. So yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that point before we move on, because you know what Dasta said also spoke to that for me.
Actually, Madera, I think that's a really good point. And I will share with you that they are being valued more in the business world now. I mean, if you truly look, there was a recent report that came out. It's 34 pages long. If you have an opportunity to read it, it was produced by Al Jazeera, Bloomberg's, and Microsoft. And when they look at hiring for positions now, they will take attitude way and aptitude differently. It used to be that you were hired because of your skills. Now you're hired because of your emotional intelligence score, not your IQ. So those things are being recognized. Is change slow? Absolutely. Change does not happen quickly. But I know that when I'm hiring someone, I'm going to look for their emotional intelligence level first. And that is the caring, the compassion, the empathy. And if they have the attitude and the aptitude, that's a perfect employee. So, I think we can celebrate that some of those things are in fact changing, but change is slow. Yeah. Change does not happen quickly. So just is. Wish it was different, but it's not. Yeah. So, yeah.
I just want to say, I celebrated everybody who talked there, but specifically Mahder and Eyerusalem. The young people are answer to my prayers. When I was your age, I was on fire just like you. And I prayed to God to bring more of those. And here in front of my eyes, my prayer is answered. Seriously. Oh, wow.
Thank you.
On the same vein, I really want to thank all the women here, like especially like yourself. It is your presence here that has allowed for me in Eyerusalem to participate here. So I do want to recognize the history and the strength we come from. I want to recognize the women in our communities, our families like yourself, who've come here, fought for their families, fought for their rights, demanded, and regardless, despite of everything, still today stand here before us, educating us. So thank you.
Wow. Sweet. You all are going to make me cry now.
Yeah, me too.
This is really incredible. We have about 4 minutes before we need to wrap up. So every one of you, thank you so very much. The men that attended today, kudos to you all. I just want to say thank you. I so appreciate your openness, willingness to listen to what we have to say and understand and better understand even the way the question was formulated earlier. I'm hopeful and I am encouraged that you will take that. And then there was another gentleman also from Norway that stayed with us. It's incredible. That's what we need, right? The women, yes, it's good for us to be talking about it, to encourage one another. And I think today's panel discussion gave the word empowering and empowerment a different meaning. Sharing information, educating one another, and helping us be okay with the space that we were put in to begin with, I think is an incredible empowerment in my mind. So a lot has been said. I hope that our minds have opened up, our hearts have opened up. We're talking about finding our space. Not because we think we have missed our space. Maybe we have. Maybe as a society, in some ways, we have missed our space, or we don't recognize our space anymore. So what does it mean to find your space? How do you recognize and find your space? How can we be effective in the space we're in? How do we embrace that space that we're in? And then how can we impact our world? Me first, the home first, what's near me, this world first, and then the world we all share. I don't know how much it meant to you all, even just from the time that I was processing this and preparing this. I was able to process for myself and kind of helping my own thinking, reframing my own thinking, and taking aback and looking at and saying, what is the space that I occupy, and what does that mean? What am I doing with this space? Am I embracing it? Because in some cases, sometimes we just chase after something that may not necessarily be ours, but we just need to embrace what is ours. If I can embrace today, and if I can embrace the space I'm in today, who knows what that will create, what that will present to me. We're hearing testimonies from the young ladies here and from all of us. And like I said, the gentleman, it's an opportunity, and I hope it becomes an ongoing conversation. So as we're wrapping up our discussion today, recognize your space, be okay with it, embrace it. However long it is you're in that space, make the best out of it. Make the best out of it. Learn from it, change your own world, and then go out and change the rest of the world, or the world that we share. And I just want to say thank you, everybody that was here, all the panelists. If we can impact that space, the moment, then we can impact the world. So I just want to say thank you. And this is it for me. If somebody has a 1 minute quick wrap up, I would like to hear that.
This is for you, Mamay. I'm a woman, hear me roar.
Yep. Thank you. I think today we've given empowering women a different definition altogether. It feels good to embrace that, right? God did not make a mistake in making us who we are. So go be.
Yeah.
And occupy that space with a happy face, a smiling face, with a content heart, and with everything in you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mamay.